Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating and honestly highly controversial web of ideas. We're looking at how our bodies and minds process invisible information. We'll be unpacking the explosive testimony of whistleblower Dr. Peterson alongside some wild scientific theories that really push the boundaries of how we understand reality itself.
So here is our roadmap for today. 1. The informational field. 2. Split brains and interrogations. 3. The social media asylum. 4. The biological safe space. 5. The pineal antenna. And 6. Decalcification and conspiracy. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The informational field. The unseen blueprint of life.
Starting right at the cellular level, Dr. Peterson introduces a truly radical concept about how our physical bodies are actually built and maintained. The crucial point here, he claims that our DNA doesn't actually hold the core instructions for life itself. According to him, DNA is just the machinery, the hardware basically, reacting to a perfect external informational field that holds the true blueprint of who we are.
To make sense of this, imagine your DNA is just a standard computer printer. A printer doesn't decide what to print, right? It just executes the command. The actual document, completely free of errors or disease, lives on an invisible external computer, which is this informational field. Peterson argues that if the body can perfectly tune into this external computer, genetic diseases could theoretically be bypassed entirely, simply because the field holds the correct, perfect information.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. The source highlights a stunning Russian experiment from around the year 2000 by a researcher named Budakovsky. Get this, researchers identified a sick raspberry plant with a tumor. They then used a red laser hologram to record the light-based information of a totally healthy plant. When they transmitted that hologram to the sick cells, the tumor literally rewrote itself. It healed into a healthy plant. The disorganized cells simply followed the new, healthy instructions beamed into them. Absolutely wild.
Section 2, Split Brains and Interrogations, Manipulating the Human Processor.
So we've looked at the cellular level, but what actually happens when the information our brain receives is intentionally manipulated? Well, enter the concept of the interpreter. Neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga conducted real-world split-brain experiments where he'd flash a command, like the word walk, to just the right half of a patient's brain. The patient would stand up and walk. But when asked why they were walking, the left half of the brain, which never saw the command, didn't say, "I don't know." Instead, an interpreter mechanism instantly invented a highly believable narrative like, "Oh, I wanted to get a soda." The brain executed an external command and totally convinced itself it was a conscious choice.
Now, this exact psychological vulnerability was actually exploited by the CIA back in 1963. They produced the secret Kubark manual, which was later declassified in the 90s. Page 76 details something called the Alice in Wonderland technique. Interrogators would bombard a subject with disconnected, completely illogical questions, often speaking right over each other. The whole goal? To confound expectations. You see, when a human mind is deprived of logic, it panics. It becomes desperate for order, and eventually it accepts almost any suggested reality the interrogator offers, just to escape the mental chaos.
Which brings us to Section 3, the social media asylum, the voluntary interrogation room.
You might be wondering, how does a classified 1960s interrogation tactic apply to us today? Well, the source makes a really profound observation here. Our daily social media feeds perfectly mirror that exact CIA Alice in Wonderland technique. Think about it. In just 1 minute of scrolling, you might see a literal war zone, immediately followed by a viral dancing video, then a tragedy, a meme, an ad, and contradictory breaking news. It's a massive barrage of disconnected extreme information, just like in that interrogation room. Nothing connects. And just like the prisoner, our minds become exhausted, panicked, and highly susceptible to anyone offering a simple, confident answer amidst all that chaos.
Section 4, the biological safe space, cultivating the brain's baseline.
So, if chaotic information fractures the mind, how do we properly seed the brain with safe information from the very beginning of life? Drawing on Joseph Chilton Pearce's 1977 book, The Magical Child, the source notes that infants require continuous maternal skin contact and emotional safety, what Pearce calls the matrix, to properly process the world. When that environment is secure, the infant's brain focuses purely on growth, which leads to astonishing learning. However, if the infant experiences chronic stress, isolation, or a lack of physical connection, their developing brain shifts its energy completely away from growth and entirely into defense. That biological plan gets interrupted, locking the child into survival mode and anxious attachment.
Section 5. The pineal antenna, our physical receiver for reality.
This brings us to the actual physical hardware of our information diet. It's a tiny organ deep inside our heads. Sitting right in the absolute center of the brain is the pineal gland. It's only about the size of a grain of rice, and uniquely, it's an unpaired structure, meaning you only have one of them. While standard science recognizes it for regulating melatonin and sleep, philosopher René Descartes famously called it the seat of the soul. Dr. Peterson takes this a step further. He theorizes that because the pineal gland is incredibly rich in melanin and actually sits outside the blood-brain barrier, it functions as a literal physical antenna. An antenna perfectly designed to pick up those invisible informational fields we were talking about earlier.
To put this into perspective, let's look at researcher Itzhak Bentov's theory of perception. Imagine total reality is a massive pie. As humans, our standard senses only allow us to perceive a tiny 5% sliver, just the visible and audible reality. The other 95% of signals are completely filtered out. But if Peterson's theory holds true, and our pineal antenna worked at full capacity, that narrow slit might open up. We might perceive a much wider reality. Honestly, that could explain why historical geniuses like Newton or Tesla seemed tuned to a completely different frequency than the rest of us.
Section 6. Decalcification and conspiracy. The battle for the biological antenna.
Now, if this biological antenna is so vital, what happens when it breaks down? Well, the physiological problem is that the pineal gland is highly prone to calcification. As we age, it can literally accumulate gravel-like calcium deposits. But there might be a biological workaround. Enter Activator X. It's a mysterious nutrient discovered by dentist Weston Price in the 1930s, which we now know as vitamin K2. Peterson suggests that a specific deep-water ratfish liver oil rich in this nutrient was historically given to European children after World War II. Its remarkable property? It directs calcium into bones and safely clears it out of soft tissues. Peterson claims this can effectively decalcify the pineal gland.
Here is where the source ventures into some highly controversial territory regarding water fluoridation. We have to report this impartially. While a 2001 British study by Jennifer Luke did show that fluoride accumulates heavily in the pineal gland, Peterson takes this much further. He suggests an unverified theory that fluoride was intentionally added to public water supplies specifically to calcify this antenna, keep the population docile, and even manage lifespans. It perfectly illustrates how deeply these theories weave biology with geopolitics, regardless of where you stand on the claims.
So, whether you view this explainer as a window into suppressed science or simply a fascinating psychological rabbit hole, it leaves us with one incredibly provocative question. In a world overflowing with disconnected data, fringe theories, and manipulated algorithms, how do you verify the reality you are tuned into? Are you consciously choosing your information diet, or is your internal interpreter just making up a story to explain the chaos? Keep questioning and keep learning.